seeing that sunrise from space for the very first time, it is incredible. 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 You know, it becomes pretty obvious pretty early when you get into space that we're all kind of in this together. Pretty obvious pretty early when you get into space that we're all kind of in this together. When I launched on July 4th of 2006, Gabby thought I was going to propose from space. And then what happened?
Speaking is divil for me. Speaking is divil for me.
Again, believe what you want, and I'll believe that Gabby and her astronaut or astronaut husband should be behind bars. Did you think that speech was given by someone mentally handicapped? Well, let's remember she was shot in the forehead. Or wait, was it the back of the head? Well, let's check in with doctors. They should know what happened.
Where did the bullet hit in the brain? Where did it go? It went through on the left side, basically from the back to the front.
You actually were right behind. You were in line getting ready to see the congresswoman when you looked up.
There was actually no line. It was so informal. There was a very sort of loose, informal crowd, maybe 25 people. And I passed by the table, then moved toward the side of the table. When I looked up, he was shooting Congressman Giffords.
And you saw the bullet go right through her head.
I saw that. I did see that happen.
You said it took some time for the emergency medical teams to arrive.
I think what I'm told is that the sheriffs had to clear the area, make sure it was safe before they were allowed on. But it did take some time. Again, at times seems to take on a different perspective when you're in that situation. It may have seemed longer than it was, but
one of the great things is that places like Safeway have video footage and surveillance footage of this event. Let's check it out.
The FBI is, in fact, reviewing crystal clear surveillance video from the Tucson shopping center that captures the rampage in chilling detail. Safeway surveillance tape allegedly shows Jared Loeffner walking into the picture at 10:10 a.m. He quickly moves around a table and shoots Congresswoman Giffords in her left forehead, just above her eye. At the time the shot is fired, Loeffner is within 3 feet of Giffords.
It went through on the left side, basically from the back to the front.
And shoots Congresswoman Giffords in her left forehead, just above her eye.
It went through on the left side, basically from the back to the front.
Congresswoman Giffords was shot at very close range, the bullet apparently entering her head from the rear and then traveling out the front of the skull. A trajectory on the screen right now, as described by the physicians who treated her. They made the point that the bullet stayed entirely through the left side, in the left side of her brain. It apparently entered her skull from the rear and exited through the front, somewhere above the eye.
And then what happened?
What we do know is that the bullet went into her head at the back on the left-hand side, and it exited at the front just above her left eye.
Shoots Congresswoman Giffords in her left forehead, just above her eye.
And then what happened?
The bullet apparently entering her head from the rear, in her left forehead, entering her head from the rear.
What was I thinking?
I have never lied to you. I have always told you some version of the truth.
Truth doesn't have versions, okay?
And then traveling out the front of the skull. A trajectory on the screen right now.
Shoots Congresswoman Giffords in her left forehead, just above her eye.
Can you show us, Dr. Reed, by pointing to your own head, where the bullet entered and where it exited?
Oh, I'd love to do that, but right now I've been requested not to because I think the crime scene is not fully investigated yet, and also the family has asked that we not be too graphic about that. So it's just suffice to say that, it was a bad head injury that went through her brain.
Then, according to officials who have seen the video, Loeffner turns to his left, facing the crowd, and the shooting continues. Footage allegedly shows muzzle flashes as the gun is fired.
7, 8, maybe 10 gunshot wounds here, and I believe Gabriel Giffords is here.
Then an act of heroism captured on video. The suspect shoots Ron Barber. Federal District Judge John Roll tries to help Barber and is later shot in the back. Barber survived. Roll did not. In all, sources say Loeffner fired 32 rounds before he was tackled by participants at Giffords' event.
These tapes are described as painful to watch, but don't expect to be seeing them anytime soon. They're in the custody of the FBI and won't likely be released until trial.
Alrighty then, so the trial's over. Can we see the tapes now? Let's see this public evidence. Oh, we can't? So there's no video or photo evidence that Loeffner is even still alive? Just some sketches? Unbelievable. And yet, you're a kook if you think this was a conspiracy. Yeah, laughable.
The courtroom was riveted when Gabrielle Giffords herself and her husband, Commander Mark Kelly, got up to speak to Loeffner. They walked into the courtroom. Giffords is limping. Her right arm is in a sling. And her husband, Mark Kelly, said she no longer really has the gift of speech, that Jared Loeffner took that away from her. But Giffords stood and looked directly at Loeffner, the man who shot her. Mark Kelly addressed Loeffner directly, often rather angrily. Among the things he said, "You put a bullet in her head, but you haven't put a dent in her spirit." Gabrielle Giffords did not address Loeffner directly, but she kissed her husband, Mark Kelly, when they finished speaking, walked and sat down. Jared Loeffner was sentenced to 140 years and 7 life sentences, all consecutively. The judge says he will never get out of prison.
Yeah, Steve, it really is amazing. She actually had the bullet go all the way through her head. It went through her brain, and still she was responding to commands, which really is remarkable.
No, better.
It's better.
She wants to get better.
Better.
You want to get better.
Better.
And then what happened?
When the congresswoman came in the door, did you think she'd make it?
I knew.
You knew she'd make it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you knew she'd make it. Did you, Dr. Ree?
When you get shot in the head and a bullet goes through your brain, the chances of you living is very small, and the chances of you waking up and actually following commands is even much smaller than that.
So, Dr. Peter Ree was her physician. Let's see what we can find out about him. Here he is, dressed in his military garb. That is, of course, because Dr. Ree is a 24-year veteran of the United States Navy, and during a trip to China in 1998, he was selected to accompany U.S. President Bill Clinton as his designated surgeon. Certainly a small world. You are the president's attending physician for a trip to China, and then you just happen to be the attending trauma physician for U.S. Representative Gabrielle Giffords, who had been shot in the head near Tucson, Arizona.
And then what happened?
But something that's very strange that I think needs to be brought to people's attention, that was brought to my attention by a friend of mine, and I'm going to share it with YouTube. When we scroll down, we see something very strange on her YouTube page. Now, this lady has 236 subscribers, but she's only subscribed to 2 people. And we go down, at the very end, we see that her 2 people that she subscribed to are these 2 gentlemen right here on her YouTube page. Now, what's weird about it is we have this representative here, but then over here, this is what really caught my eye. This is a Class It Up 10, is the only other person she's subscribed to. These are the only 2 subscribers she has. When we click on his page, we come to this web page, and this is the page of as we get closer and closer, this is the page of Jared Lee Loeffner. Now, isn't that the guy that supposedly was the gunman that shot her in the head? Jared Lee Loeffner. Now, isn't that the guy that supposedly was the gunman that shot her in the head?
Is there a word for Mark?
Brave. Brave.
Thank you.
Brave.
That's what I think of when I think of you, too. Tough as nails.
Tough as nails.
The weapon used in the shooting was once illegal, and now one congresswoman wants to outlaw it again.
Now, isn't that the guy that supposedly was the gunman that shot her in the head?
And then what happened?
Mark Kelly was in public service of a different sort. A Navy captain and test pilot, he joined NASA and flew 4 missions aboard the space shuttle, commanding the Endeavor's final flight, while Gabby was undergoing brain surgery.
Yes, you heard that right. He flew a NASA mission while his wife was undergoing brain surgery, because that happens all the time to people whose wives are really not in brain surgery.
What was that like for you?
It was hard. You know, she was on the operating table literally as I was looking out the window flying the rendezvous. We're both going 17,500 miles an hour. And I've got to fly this within about 2 inches to docking while Gabby's in there with the neurosurgeon.
Did you worry about him?
Yes.
You worried about me? My last trip into space?
Yeah.
Oh, you were worried about him, huh? Just like he worried about you while he maneuvered that space shuttle at 17,500 miles per hour to dock with the ISS. Hey, by the way, where is that space shuttle? Oh, you know, the one that used to take up to 7 people to and from space and dock with the ISS? Oh, you guys got rid of them. All 4 of them? All gone? Great. It's a nice expenditure of taxpayers' money. So now how do we get astronauts to the ISS? Oh, we pay Russia? And how much do we pay for each seat? $81 million to send one person to the ISS. So that's about $243 million to send 3 up there. That's certainly interesting. I guess we couldn't have kept the space shuttles going for that much money. Would have cost well beyond that, even though they could already fly to and from space. If anybody believes this stuff and doesn't see the absolute theft of taxpayers' money, more power to you. Now, many might say, why? Why, Jaron? Why all this? And if I told you gun laws, you might have a problem with it.
His background check came up clean, Diane.
Even those in the gun store. Thank you, Pierre, for your reporting.
Yes, thank you, Pierre, for your excellent investigative journalism. What if I told you that there was an arrest, a booking, and several trials, and yet there is not one, and I repeat, not one image or video of Jared Loeffner alive at all from any point after the event, or actually after the mugshot? Not one. Where is Jared Loeffner today? Well, today Jared is serving life imprisonment, actually 7 life sentences, after he pleaded guilty in November 2012. And again, for anybody doing any research into this subject, they'll know that the whole story makes no sense. For instance, he got in an argument with his father on that morning, carrying a black bag, and the dad asked him, "What are you doing? What is that? Where are you going?" And Jared mumbled something back to his dad. His dad said he didn't understand that. It was unintelligible, and then Jared left. Now, this is supposedly at 7 o'clock in the morning. At 7:30 a.m., Mark Hart, spokesman for the Arizona Game and Fish Department, said that Loeffner was stopped by an officer for running a red light. And, okay, so he runs a red light at 7:30. He's given a verbal warning and released. Now, if you look at the documents and all the testimony, you'll find out that one of the people that were wanted as a person of interest was a certain driver that was leaving the scene. Well, that driver turned out to be a taxi driver who dropped off the suspect at the shopping center. So somehow, this person, Loeffner, went somewhere and dropped off his car and then took a taxi to the Safeway. Here's video of Jared Loeffner supposedly arriving at court for sentencing. Do you see him anywhere? I sure don't. I mean, this case has so many holes, errors, and nonsense involved. It really is an attack, or an expose, if you will, on the intelligence of the citizens of the world. I mean, the fact that people buy this story at all, or Gabby's act, or what has happened to Loeffner, is ridiculous. Again, there are no images, as in zero, and no video, as in zero. All that we get are these drawings. I thought the 1800s are over. Nope, we still get colored pencil drawings or sketches of these so-called perpetrators.
Here's the next statement.
Now, you may recognize this lady. Who is she? She is Jared Loeffner's defense attorney. Her name is Judy Clark. Now, where have you maybe seen her before? I don't know, maybe one of her other high-profile clients. Her list consists of kind of a who's who in the hoax community. First, she represented Theodore Kaczynski, if you remember him, the Unabomber, who he actually testified or was quoted as saying Judy Clark is a bitch on wheels and a sicko. Damn, I tend to trust that guy. Another one of her clients was Zacharias Muasasou. I'm sure I blew that name. Basically, he was one of the suspects in 9/11. She also represented Eric Randolph, who was the guy who was charged in the Centennial Olympic Park bombing of 1996. She also represented, as we know, Jared Lee Loeffner. She also represented, after that, Johar Sarnaya, who, if you remember him, was from the Boston Marathon bombings. So she just gets these guys. I don't know how. I'm sure it has nothing to do with anything at all.
One thing that I think is clear with young people and with adults as well is that we just have to be repetitive about this. It's not enough to simply have a catchy ad on a Monday and then only do it every Monday. We need to do this every day of the week and just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way. And just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
Her left forehead.
Entering her head from the rear.
She's only subscribed to 2 people. And we go down. Now, isn't that the guy that supposedly was the gunman that shot her in the head?
What was I thinking?
And then what happened? Nothing.
Nothing.
I'm an identical twin. In 1996, we both became astronauts in the same class.
Because I cry all the time.
And we learned a lot from my mom. She became a police officer in the 1970s. And I remember my mother trying to figure out how she was going to pass this physical fitness test. It was a hard test. It was designed for men. But that did not deter my mother. When she finally took the test, instead of getting over in the required 9 seconds, she got over in 4.5, much faster than almost all the men, and became one of the first female police officers. You know, my parents taught my brother and I the value of hard work. I mean, I always knew that I was going to serve this country in some way. I flew 39 combat missions in Operation Desert Storm over Iraq and Kuwait.
All right. Nice, you like it.
You remember when you first entered Congress for the
Yes.
first time?
Yes, so exciting.
It was exciting. You know, I thought then that I had the risky job.
Yes.
Turned out that you were the one who had the
Yes.
risky job.
911, where's your emergency?
A gunman shot Arizona Congresswoman Gabrielle Giffords and several others today at an outdoor event in Tucson, Arizona.
I remember the first time I saw her. You know, within minutes, a bloody tear coming down her eye. She didn't even look like her. You know, but it was her. You know, but it was her.
In a world with many dangers, this menace must be confronted. Now, after careful deliberation, I have decided that the United States should take military action against Syrian regime targets. Syrian regime targets. Syrian regime targets. Syrian regime targets.
You know, but it was her. One thing I realized early on was, you know, that Gabby needed me to help her through this. She needed an advocate. And the thing I have to do for my wife is to be able to think clearly and make good decisions. Nearly lost your life serving your country.
Yes.
In her left forehead.
Entering her head from the rear.
She's only subscribed to 2 people. And we go down, Now, isn't that the guy that supposedly was the gunman that shot her in the head?
Yes, yes.
But what do you do when bad things happen?
Move ahead.
You gotta move ahead.
Yes.
You gotta move ahead and try to make a difference in the world.
You're ready?
Let's go.
We're gonna go 100 miles?
100 miles? No.
How far you wanna go?
5 miles.
You know, I learned a lot from being an astronaut. I learned a lot from being a pilot in the Navy. I learned a lot about solving problems from being an engineer.
So many times during spacewalks outside the International Space Station, we can see air bubbles rising up. Can you touch on how there are air bubbles in space?
Can you be more specific? Air bubbles?
So yeah, like a lot of times during the footage, the NASA footage, you can see bubbles coming up out of the helmets or kind of from underneath you. How do you explain bubbles in space?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about. You might, now sometimes you get water in the helmet, and it's either you know, from sweat or from the cooling garments. And you know, in some of my spacewalks, I had like water in the helmet, not like I was going to drown in the helmet, but just little bits of water probably came from sweat. Often on the outside of the space station, you'll liberate little pieces of, you know, it's a really harsh environment out there, and the outside of the space station gets beat up pretty good. And sometimes, you know, you'll see just little flecks of paint or something that you might have disrupted floating away from the suit. And, you know, that's generally what that is. I've never seen any kind of air bubble anywhere.
Yeah. Could it be that you're filming in an underwater pool and you're not really out there? I just encourage everyone to look up bubbles in space, hashtag bubbles in space. Thank you very much.
But what I learned from my wife is how you use policy to improve people's lives. Arizonans are facing incredibly challenging issues here in the years to come. Access to affordable health care.
Is curing patients a sustainable business model? Because I guess they're just going to come right out and state what we all know is the obvious, considering what kind of rip things out of you and fill you full of poisons allopathic medicine system that we're all forced to be on and subjected to in this world. And they've known this for many years, and we've done videos on scientists who found cures for cancer. He found specific frequencies could be used when matched up with specific pathogens in order to destroy them. And as he continued to isolate viruses and bacteria and locate their frequencies, he also claimed he discovered the virus responsible for cancer 60 years ago and were silenced and ostracized. There have been some that they think have been murdered over finding different cures for cancer. They want to bury that because it's not a sustainable business model, you see.
The stagnation of wages, job growth, the economy.
We're going to take our country back, folks. We're going to take it back.
We are with you, sire, for freedom, to the death.
Man, I like that guy. Thank you, man. Thank you.
You know, as the climate warms, we're going to have more drought here in the desert. You know, as the climate warms, we're going to have more drought here in the desert.
We have every reason to be skeptical that our scientific community is maintaining its integrity.
A new report says climate change is a growing target for false news and misinformation. According to Axios, climate change is the easiest news to fake, and that's partly because climate change is intangible and sometimes a controversial topic.
You know, as the climate warms.
In an exclusive interview Sunday with the Daily Mail, NOAA whistleblower Bates said, quote, they had good data from buoys and they threw it out and corrected it by using the bad data from ships. You never change good data to agree with the bad, but that's what they did, so as to make it look as if the sea was warmer.
You know, as the climate warms.
So what we're seeing here is a drastic change in climate, aren't we?
Well, climate has always been changing, but this has nothing to do with man. In fact, we predicted that there would be extreme heat in East Europe and Russia this summer. And it's caused by a certain circulation pattern. CO2 does not cause circulation patterns. What causes those is a combination of solar activity and the state of the phases of the moon.
But hang on, Piers, excuse me, just a minute. You say this isn't caused by man. How come they're reporting this heat wave is recognised as the worst in 1,000 years of recorded history in Russia? And surely
of course,
man has got something to do with this, hasn't he?
No, nothing to do with it. The only connection is man is here at the same time as the sun and the moon are doing things. You see, a very similar situation happened about 132 years ago, where there was the same sun, earth, lunar, magnetic states. There was heat waves in Russia, and there were also floods in Pakistan as now. And in the previous few years, there was also floods in the English summers, also 132 years ago. So these things are dictated by solar activity in the moon. They're nothing to do with mankind, and those who say that are just trying to make money out of carbon.
But are we not going to see this? Are we not going to see this again next year, the year on? I mean, it's quite recent that
that's a very interesting question. These things do come in bursts, and we're working on that very question, those forecasts. We did say there would be a series of wet summers in England, for example, which we've had. Now, will there be a series of these very hot summers in Russia? We don't know. We have to work on that. But I assure you, it's nothing to do with carbon dioxide. And if you stop driving around Moscow, it won't affect next summer one jot.
Well, how come then so many climate change scientists disagree with you and they get so much support for what they say?
They're on a gravy train, for heaven's sake. There's trillions of pounds traded every year on carbon trading and doing silly things like building windmills, which will achieve nothing. I mean, there's money in it, and that has corrupted science.
You know, as the climate warms,
that we're not warming nearly as fast as the IPCC climate models suggest we should have been warming. So the point is, a lot of evidence now is being amassed, which suggests that the climate system is simply not as sensitive to our addition of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere as most scientists think it is. I also want to say, since we're talking about most scientists, you know, I've heard 97%, 98%. There's a recent paper by John Cook and co-authors who looked at thousands of research papers which have been published in the scientific literature to see what fraction, you know, support the scientific consensus on global warming. Well, it turns out that the 97% consensus that they found, I am indeed part of. And Senator Sessions mentioned he would agree with it too. And my associate, John Christie, he agrees with it. In fact, all skeptics that I know of that work in this business, all are part of that 97%, because the 97% includes people who think humans have some influence on climate. Well, that's a fairly innocuous statement. And that's something that continually annoys me, is those of us that are called deniers. It's never actually, I think the D word was actually used by the chairman today. It's never actually been pointed out. What is it that we deny? Also, you know, this 97%. Well, what does the 97% consensus mean? You know, what do all of those people agree to? Well, they agree to something fairly innocuous, and it's something that most of us agree to, that humans must have some influence on climate. The question is how much, and how much influence makes all the difference in the world if you're going to be basing policy decisions, carbon taxes, regulations, legislation, whatever, on them. It makes all the difference in the world. Exactly how much warming we can expect due to human activities. I'm going to leave it at that. I think just to point out that some of the statistics that have been given today, I think, are only giving half the story. For instance, Jennifer Francis has talked about the decrease in the Arctic sea ice. And I know something about that because I'm the lead scientist on NASA's best instrument for monitoring that decrease in Arctic sea ice. But what she didn't mention is that Antarctic sea ice, over that same 30-year period that we've been monitoring, has been increasing. So there's a lot of half-truths in this business. You can point to some areas that are changing, some areas that are changing in one direction, some are changing in another direction. At some point, we have to ask ourselves, is all of this just mostly part of what the climate system does naturally? With that, I will end my testimony.
Thank you very much, Dr. Spencer.
As the climate warms, we're going to have more drought here in the desert. Solving some of the hardest problems requires one thing, and that's teamwork.
Hey, partisanship and polarization and gerrymandering and corporate money have ruined our politics, and it's divided us.
Because I cry all the time.
I care about people. I care about the state of Arizona. I care about this nation. So because of that, I've decided that I'm launching a campaign for the United States Senate. So because of that, I've decided that I'm launching a campaign for the United States Senate. So because of that, I've decided that I'm launching a campaign for the United States Senate. We've seen this retreat from science and data and facts.
They had good data from buoys and they threw it out.
From science and data and facts. From science and data and facts.
According to Axios, climate change is the easiest news to fake.
Her left forehead.
Entering her head from the rear.
From science and data and facts. And if we don't take these issues seriously, we can't solve these problems. We're going to need to bring people together from all parts of the state and all walks of life.
And just really brainwash people into,
We're going to need to bring people together.
And just really brainwash people into thinking about guns in a vastly different way.
So please join us. Damn the torpedoes.
Full speed ahead.